The Raspberry Pi. What started out as a tiny computer for hobbyists to build maker projects is now more powerful than ever, with the latest Raspberry Pi 4 featuring a quad-core CPU, up to 8 GB of RAM, and the ability to drive two 4K displays. This got me thinking, could you use a Raspberry Pi as your daily driver, not as a base for your projects, but as your actual desktop computer? Well, that's what we're here to find out. I'll be showing you how to install Pop! OS, a Linux distribution that is typically associated with the desktop, on a humble Raspberry Pi. If you want to use the Raspberry Pi as a daily driver, you should have the most powerful one possible, meaning the Raspberry Pi Model 4B, or better yet, this, the Raspberry Pi 400. Now, the 400 is a Raspberry Pi in a case which includes a keyboard and mouse, power cable, and even a project book to get you started. Now, this looks to me like a computer of sorts, but what's missing? Well, no, not the display. Yeah, obviously you need to connect it to a display. No, what's missing is a desktop operating system. You see, typically the Raspberry Pi comes with Raspberry Pi OS, a version of Debian which is tailored for the Pi. This is a very bare bones system, providing just what is required to get the Pi up and running, and then getting started with working on your next project. It is not meant as a desktop replacement. What is meant as a full Linux desktop is Pop! OS. Pop! OS is a full Linux distribution developed by Linux hardware manufacturer System76. Based on Ubuntu, the system is pre-installed on System76 computers such as the Oryx Pro laptop, which is my daily driver, but also all other hardware from the company. Outside of System76 themselves, many users of other hardware use Pop! OS, since it offers all the ease of use and compatibility that Ubuntu does, but with a more efficient and focused interface, better support for graphics cards, and flat-pack software installation, complete with an easy front end known as PopShop. So the plan for this video is to install Pop! OS on the Raspberry Pi, see what's included, compare it to the laptop experience, and give a verdict. Okay, so the first thing we'll need to do is to download Raspberry Pi OS and flash it to an SD card, or ideally an SSD, ideally an NVMe SSD, so you'll have better speed. However, if you don't want to attach other stuff to your Raspberry Pi, or you don't have one of those available, an SD card will still work. So the first thing we're going to do is go to pop.system76.com, and this is the webpage for Pop! OS. We'll click download, and you'll see that there are three versions: Pop! OS 2110, Pop! OS 2110 with the NVIDIA drivers, and Pop! OS 2110 for the Raspberry Pi 4. This will work on either a Raspberry Pi 4 or what I have, a Raspberry Pi 400. Now, depending on when you follow these instructions, the version might be different, but there should be this Ras Pi 4 version. So I'm just going to go ahead and click save, and that 2.35 gigabyte image is downloading. Now, whilst that's going on, we'll also need to download a tool. Now, you can use the Balena Etcher to flash your drive, but since we are using a Raspberry Pi, we can actually also use the Raspberry Pi Imager. So just go to raspberrypi.org/software. All the links will be down in the video description. And you'll want to download the Raspberry Pi Imager, which is available for Linux, Windows, and macOS. Okay, and once you've installed it, it works pretty much the same on either system. Okay, now I already have the Raspberry Pi Imager, so I'm not going to download it again, but in your case, you'll need to download that. Okay, so now that that's done, we can simply open the Imager. And whilst I'm here, I'm also going to plug in my SD card. Okay, and you'll notice that some stuff comes up here for my SD card. So first I'm going to click Choose OS, And then from here, I'm going to scroll down and say Use Custom. And from my Downloads folder, I'm going to choose the Pop! OS image that I just downloaded and click Open. Now I'll click Choose Storage, and you will notice that there is this drive here, which is my 16GB SD card. Make sure you choose the right one. Okay, these are another 2 external drives I have, which are not what I want to erase. So make sure you choose the correct one, and then click Write. Okay, you'll be warned that all existing data will be removed. I'm fine with that. And in my case, and probably on macOS as well, you will need to type in your password. Now what's going to happen here is that the Raspberry Pi imager is going to first write the image to the card, and then it will verify that the data was properly written. Okay, so just give this process a few minutes to make sure that your system gets written to the card correctly. Okay, and as you can see, it says the image has been written to the card, and you can now remove the SD card from the reader. Okay, so we're done here from my computer, so next we will proceed to the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so I've got the Raspberry Pi set up, the SD card is inserted, so all that's left to do now is power it on. Okay, and something is booting here. And oh, here we are, Pop! OS, and we are greeted with the welcome screen. So let's just quickly go through this welcome process here. So we choose our keyboard layout. Next, I'm asked to connect to my Wi-Fi network, which I'm gonna do now. And we can choose some privacy settings. I'm gonna leave location services enabled, why not? And I'll choose my time zone. And from here we can connect our online accounts just like we can on proper Pop! OS. I'm gonna skip it for the purposes of this demo, and you can always do this later from the settings menu. Now I'll type in my name and we'll set a password. All done. Start using Pop! OS. Now we're not quite done. There's still the first time configuration screens to come up. You should note that the first time you boot Pop! OS on your Pi, it is going to be booting a little bit slower, but subsequent boots do get better. Okay, so as you can see, the desktop has loaded, and we're greeted by another welcome screen. So first of all, we can choose whether we want the dock to extend to the edges, no dock at all, or a dock which is, you can say Mac OS style. I personally normally say extend to the edges. We can configure the top bar to hide or show the workspaces and applications button, as well as the position of the date and time. And here we have some information about using the launcher, using gestures if we have a trackpad. And here we can choose between light and dark mode. And you'll notice that dark mode is actually the default here, which is fine by me since I quite like dark mode, so I'll leave it enabled. And that's it. Start using Pop! OS. And immediately from first boot, I can see that as a person who uses Pop! OS daily, this looks pretty similar to what I see on my normal desktop. You can see down here there is the applications launcher with many of the default applications which are also on a regular Pop! OS installation. We have obviously the file manager here with the default folder configuration here. And one of the features that makes Pop! OS super famous is the tiling functionality. So I'm actually going to switch to a direct feed of the desktop so we can explore it a little bit better. Okay, so we're on a direct feed of the desktop now. Now there are a few things to note. I am running this on a Raspberry Pi 400 with 4 GB of RAM. For the best experience, you should probably have the 8 GB model. You'll also notice I'm connected to Wi-Fi here, and I have a screen recorder in the background. So I'm not really giving it the best possible conditions. And yet, yeah, this is pretty much Pop! OS, and I'm able to use everything. I'm going to load up a system monitor here so we can look at the performance of this device. You can see that right now my CPU is being blasted. The Raspberry Pi is a quad-core ARM-based system. Now, again, do remember that I have a screen recording going and that I'm also installing updates, which, by the way, I recommend you do as soon as you install Pop! OS. So you can simply go here to the Pop Shop and install available updates. You'll also get a pop-up right here in the center showing you that you have updates to install. That looks like this. Okay, so there were a bunch of updates, 161 components with updates, as you can see here. So I'm letting those run in the background, and I will eventually restart. RAM-wise, as I mentioned, I have the 4GB model, so right now I'm using 2.2 gigs of that 4GB of RAM. So you should definitely have better performance if you have the 8 GB model. Okay, so now let's see what this actually feels like. So we have Firefox installed here, and it's pretty much the latest version, 95.2 point something at the time of recording this video. And of course, let's try going to YouTube and playing a video. Okay, so as you can see, my channel is loading now. Okay, so let's try and play a video. Now again, considering the specs of my particular Raspberry Pi, I'm not going to be playing this at 4K. In fact, I even have the resolution down to 1080p anyway here.
My quest to switch to private, open, responsible technologies continues. If you want to know more about
Okay, so as you can see, the video is playing just fine here. Remember, I'm hammering my system and yet it's still playing smoothly. Although, of course, this is a potato resolution here. I think it's playing at 360p. No, 480p, still not perfect. However, I will run this again once my installations have finished here, so I can take a look at what it's like without the recorder going on and without updates being installed. Okay, so let's see what actual applications we get here. So obviously there is the browser, as you can see. Now, if we go to the applications menu, you'll notice that there's the typical GNOME applications: calculator, calendar, contacts, files. We have Geary as the email client. OBS is something I've installed. The Pop Shop, settings, terminal, text editor, VLC, and weather. And here we have the category. So we have LibreOffice here, some system tools, some other utilities, including a PDF viewer, video player, and so on, and then the option to create our own folder. Obviously, this system comes with Pop Shop. As you can see here right now, updates are being installed, and since there are quite a few of them, as you can see here, this is taking a while. So yeah, I'm going to leave those going in the background, but in the meantime, I'm going to actually try LibreOffice, since I'm curious what a full-fledged Office suite will perform like on my Raspberry Pi with only 4 gigs of RAM whilst I'm recording the screen and whilst updates are being installed. So I'm not speeding anything up here. I want you to see the actual launch time, at least at these conditions, and then I'll repeat this again when I'm not installing updates. But this is a good test because you will have multitasking, of course. And yeah, actually, that loaded quicker than I expected. So let's see what the typing experience is like here. Okay, so my spelling errors aside, there is some lag. Again, I'm really hammering my system here. However, I was surprised that LibreOffice actually loaded up in a reasonable amount of time, and it seems to be working just fine here. If I click bold, yeah, there we go. So that seems to be working. Now, another thing I want to try is a relatively heavy website. So I'm actually going to go back to Firefox, and I'm going to open Facebook and see how that performs. Okay, so the Facebook website is loading now. Again, I'm not speeding anything up, so you can see exactly what it feels like. And as you can see, the initial impression is that it's loaded up pretty fast. And as I scroll through my timeline, again, I mean, okay, you can see that some of the content is taking a while to load, but once it does actually load, the scrolling is actually pretty smooth. Now, this could be down to my Wi-Fi, although I have since upgraded, and this system is sitting right next to a Wi-Fi 6 router. So I'm pretty sure this is actually the Raspberry Pi. Now again, I'm not giving it a fair try here. Remember, I'm doing stuff in the background, recording the screen. I have the 4 gig model, and also I am running everything off an SD card. If you actually install Pop! OS on an SSD, or even better yet, an NVMe external drive, then you're going to have much better performance. But I mean, considering all that I'm loading the system with, yeah, I mean, looks to be absolutely fine to me. Okay, so I've restarted the system now, and the updates have been installed. I do, however, still have the screen recorder running because, well, you know, I need to record stuff so you can see it. So now with a freshly booted system and with nothing going on in the background except the recording, I'm going to go back to the system monitor and see how hard the Raspberry Pi is being hit. And you can see here from resources that, yeah, CPU usage is still at almost 100% on all 4 cores. I have much less RAM being used at 1.5 to 1.6 gig of usage. And you will see that the CPU is slowly dipping further down into the 70s mark right now. So now in these better conditions, I'm again going to launch Firefox. And again, not speeding anything up here. This is to show you what it actually feels like. Now what I will do is off camera, I will actually try using this without the screen recorder running. And if there's any difference in performance, I'll let you know. So again, I'm gonna go to Facebook. And Facebook has loaded. And as I start scrolling down, you can see that, yeah, the browser is not keeping up here. It is a little bit sluggish, I must admit. All right. I'm actually going to go to YouTube and just play some random video and see what that looks like. So this video here is playing. Okay, I'm going to switch off closed captions, and you'll notice that by default, YouTube has selected a quality of 360p. Okay, now at 360p the video is playing, but you would expect that. Let's try something a bit more decent. So I'm going to try taking the quality up to 1080p. Okay, so the video is now at 1080p, and you can see that the Pi is struggling to keep up with the video playback. And again, this is not unexpected. Okay, now what I am gonna do as the conclusion to this video is I'm actually gonna switch off my screen recorder, try all this stuff again, and let you know in the conclusion whether there is any noticeable improvement. So, I disabled my screen recorder. Did it make a difference? Oh, absolutely. It is night and day. As soon as I switched off my screen recorder, pages started loading fine. Playing back a 1080p YouTube video, even at full screen, was no problem at all. Facebook scrolling speed was fine. Applications launched even quicker. So really, it was the screen recorder that was affecting me. I really need to get a video capture card. So I'm really surprised by how well it performs, especially considering that I was installing on a cheapo 16 gig SD card and I have the 4 gig version of the Pi and not the 8 gig version of the Pi, and yet still it performs admirably. In fact, it's super close to using Pop! OS on my daily driver Oryx Pro. Now, of course, the Raspberry Pi is based on ARM, so the software which is in the Pop Shop is obviously the ARM version. However, the ARM version of the software is not always optimized perfectly. For example, I tried to use OBS, you saw it in the video, but when I try to launch OBS, it says your GPU is not supported. It turns out that in order to get OBS working on the Raspberry Pi, you have to compile it yourself. Definitely not something I want to bother doing. I know how to do it, I just don't want to bother. So since it's in the Pop Shop, you would have expected Pop! OS to provide a package that already works on the Raspberry Pi, right? Because this is, after all, Pop! OS for the Raspberry Pi. So there's still some work to be done with regards to software compatibility and availability. But overall, I am really happy, and you should definitely give it a try if you have a Raspberry Pi. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you'll give Pop! OS a try on your Pi. Check out the video description for all links mentioned, and once you're down there, please like this video and subscribe to my channel Tech Guru. Your subscription really helps to keep me motivated and making more videos like this. If you want to go a step further like these awesome people, please also consider subscribing to me on Patreon for early access to videos, a patron-only chat, your name in the credits, and more. Finally, you can also watch all videos of this channel on the Open Odyssey platform. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.